Thanks for joining me for Basics of Residential Physical Security, a webinar that we're putting on for our members here with HAI Group. There listed is my contact information for this session today. I will show that contact information again at the end. So today's agenda is going to deal with security risk management, proactive operational behaviors, strategic thinking, basic site security concepts, and assessing the situation. So our objectives are fairly simple. We're going to talk a little bit about today security risk management and what that entails. We'll talk a little bit about proactive operational behaviors and give some specifics on that. I'm also going to summarize some basic strategic thinking for real estate oversight, because I know that some housing agencies have both residential and they may have a commercial component as a part, like offices and perhaps leased spaces. We'll describe basic site security concepts. We will identify some of the basics around technology implementation. Today, we will also describe some of the security assessment basics. So we're going to get into it beginning today with the security risk management. So the question, how does security risk management work? Just like all other risk management processes, but with your major focus being on security matters. So I'm hoping that everyone can see this little diagram that we have, which kind of outlines the steps for security risk management. And if you are very familiar with risk management and the steps that are involved with that, then you'll see how this kind of sits right behind it. So we will identify security risk issues. Then once we've figured out what they are, we assess the security issue, analyze it, and from there we'll create an action plan to deal with it. And then we take that action plan as a fourth step and implement whatever the action plan or method that we would use to try and address the risk or that security exposure. And then we measure, monitor, we look to see if it was effective, ineffective, what kinds of impacts came from it, if it resolved the issue and became a solution or some type of way to reduce that exposure, and it didn't impact the organization or people within the organization, then it probably was going to be listed and looked upon as being resolved. And we can move on to the next one. As a proactive operational behavior, we tend to look at things in a broad way of trying to deal with an operational behavior or operational behaviors, things that you should be looking at and doing. So as a part of proactive operational behaviors, we want to conduct inspections. So we need to conduct inspections so we can figure out where we are with the security of our organizations and the properties and sites that we deal with. We want to make sure that there's oversight in place, someone or an entity or a group that will take a look at things. We need to be aware of what human capital is involved, basically people, or what people are involved. And we also want to look at the leases and rules for the locations, properties, sites that we're overseeing, and we're concerned with what security looks like in those particular locations. When conducting inspections, we want to make sure that we're checking unit doors, windows, and this is applicable even to a commercial space. You want to make sure that the windows and doors are in good condition and that they're in serviceable condition that will provide some basic protective values for the location and its occupants. We want to look at lighting. We want to take a look at the lighting and go and determine if it's effective. The most effective lighting in today's times, everyone is referring to LED, but LED white light is going to provide be the best source of lighting in dark spaces. And it also gives you that ability to be able to identify threats that may be approaching you or an area where you are. Fencing. We want to make sure that we are, and these are just a few of the things. We want to make sure that fencing, when we're looking at areas where we have property, fencing is a barrier that can keep unauthorized or abnormal users from entering your place, or at least establishing a boundary so that people will acknowledge that this area belongs to you. Facilitating risk oversight, monitoring physical safety and security. And again, looking back on making sure that you're out looking at those things that impact your physical safety of your residents and your staff. Risk planning for exposures. We know that as people are upon your property, that does create a situation where you want to make sure that you are planning for those things that could happen, those exposures that may exist by the very nature of having a multifamily environment in an urban setting would be an example of that. We know that urban environments do inherently bring particular exposures, and we need to make sure that we're planning for those things. Risk response basically is stating how are we responding to those risks that we've either identified or now have been brought to our attention. So we want to know how we're responding to that. The use of human capital, basically, you need to analyze what are the needs? How many people do you need? Are those persons or people internal, or are they contracted professionals? And then along the way of training, what training do we give both our internal personnel and our external personnel in the realm of security? And what kinds of directives or orders do we give them as far as how they handle certain events that may come about? So, talking about what are the protocols, what are we telling them we want them to do? Lease and rule implementations, we want to make sure that we have, when it comes to our tenants and those that will be impacted through a lease or the rules for a particular community or site, we want to make sure we have a detailed onboarding process. We want to make sure that we're explaining what the expectations are. We want to also drive the conversation to gear in compliance. We want those that are both our staff, the folks that are residents and visitors in compliance of whatever our rules may be. And we want our leases to give rise to and support what it is that we're looking to have happen, because we want to make sure that we don't miss a piece of that. So we want some consistent enforcement. We want to make sure that when there is a rule that is violated or a situation that we have placed in as a term within the lease, especially related to security, we want to make sure that we notify the offender that particular behavior or action was improper and it needs to be corrected, and that there may be other levels of correction that one can take towards that. Strategic thinking. Meet with your staff regularly to maintain focus on critical aspects of organizational and property security. It's just important that you let everyone on your team know what they need to be aware of so that they can properly support what it is that you're doing. Communicate and meet with the property managers about new developments and security expectations. As we change things and as agencies and organizations grow, they sometimes do acquire new properties or actually develop from ground up. And we need to explain what security expectations may need to accompany how we do business. So we want to make sure that we're communicating that at all levels, to include with property managers. If you're a property manager in a security management role, and that often happens in certain environments and with certain size organizations, meet with your staff to discuss the things that are impeding your property security efforts. So if there are things that you're finding, for example, lighting that is not working properly, or barriers that have been damaged and that is leading to abnormal users, unauthorized persons on the property, that needs to be shared with your staff so that proper plan can be put in place to help smoothly run the property security efforts. So you do want to make sure that, again, as that leadership in that role of security manager, if you're a property manager, then you want to make sure that you have that ability. So if you're the designated or designee for property security efforts, maybe you're the risk manager, maybe you're a security manager, maybe you're a regional manager. It just really depends upon what title or hat you wear. Develop relationships and collaborations with all stakeholders to seed a program of success. If you have other people below or that are subordinates that report to you, again, we want to make sure that they understand what those expectations are. If you have community stakeholders, other folks that have other programs that tie directly into how your property is run, whether it be a contractor, local police departments, or other types of services and programs, you want to make sure that everyone is aware of what you're doing. Everyone is on board with making sure that they can help support in the way that is most appropriate. So when it comes to basic site security concepts, one thing that I would say that is important in this day and age and seems to be getting a lot of traction, and that is crime prevention through environmental design. Most people in this realm refer to it as CPTED. It's defined by the National Institute of Crime Prevention as a strategy that brings together community members to examine how an area's physical design can influence human behavior, reduce crime, fear of crime, and improve the quality of life. That is so important to remember that. And as managers that have some responsibility for security in a community, it's important to remember that thought process. Recognized principles of CPTED, landscape maintenance is one of them. It's important to maintain good, clean landscaping so that the areas of your business can be viewed. LED lighting applications. A lot of the agencies that I work with currently in my territory are starting to upgrade and change from traditional incandescent lighting that the coloration doesn't give that bright white light. So they've either installed new fixtures or new bulbs so that they can get that bright white lighting, as they want to make sure that provides crystal clear images of their surroundings. Natural surveillance is, we'll talk about these things in a second, but natural surveillance, being able to see right onto property, having access controls, natural asset access controls. Territorial reinforcement, we're going to speak in detail in just a second on that one. And activity support social management. And these are programs that many multifamily communities put in place. And these programs range from Boys and Girls Clubs to Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and other programs that may be like those. But some of the other programs that may be in place may be for adults. And a lot of different organizations do sponsor adult social management programs to teach adults certain activities and certain things. And you bring those things to a property or to a community, it also helps to give the user of those programs buy-in about taking care of the program, the property or community where they reside. So when we talk about natural surveillance, we're examining existing alcoves because, again, sometimes this CPTED is deployed after you have a building or a community already constructed. So you're stuck with certain things. So you want to examine the existing alcoves and decide what's a good way to be able to see or to view what's going on in particular areas. We want unobstructed views of the environments. We want to make sure we have appropriate vegetation control. We want to make sure that we are doing the things that will keep others from committing crimes. We want to change their thought process and behavior. Appropriate use of lighting. We want to avoid shadows and glares. And if using this image as an example, this particular light that's in this image has a glare. And those are the kinds of things that we're trying to deter in our process of using the proper usage of lighting. We want to make sure that lighting is down and not facing outward in dark spaces, because a lot of times you and I will look and it provides somewhat of a glare. And that glare could actually distort our vision from being able to see a threat or hazard approaching. Building materials are transparent. CPTED typically looks at windows, making sure that folks can see out and law enforcement and security professionals can see in, and we can see what's going on within those areas. So natural access controls, again, visible building entrances. We want to make sure that people can see where they're going. Breezeways can be impacted greatly because even during the brightest of days, sometimes they are very dim looking, shadowy, and can provide places that others can, who have ill intent, may be able to lie in wait for individuals that use this area to approach. Clearly identify access and points of entry because we don't want people wandering. We want to know that if they're off the beat path, then perhaps they don't belong. Clearly marked pathways with signs. We want to make sure you put those things in place. And some agencies have gotten a little creative with how to direct people, painted sidewalks, color coded sidewalks to help people enter particular areas. Comprehensive wayfinding systems include small signs, large signs, those things that will make sure that people will be able to get to and from their actual locations without being hindered by getting lost. Review your actions for effectiveness. You want to make sure that you look at the signs as you approach and make sure that how you have them posted makes sense to get the folks that you're looking to get into the property, getting them in without causing any type of loss of direction. Territorial reinforcements, again, these are part of the process of establishing that ownership. Some organizations will use colors and pavement treatments to establish this belongs to us, whether it's labeling or coloration. Examining signage, again, that sets forth this is HAI townhomes, and the signs say fencing. It says that we're separate from the adjacent or adjoining property that's next door to us. The fencing kind of says, okay, this is where HAI townhome starts. Landscape, sometimes you can use landscape. You can use different types of vegetation to establish that perimeter or that territory. Sometimes, if depending if you were called rose gardens, then you might want to use a different variety of roses to establish the perimeter and where your property starts to give that idea that, okay, I'm at the Rose Garden Apartments, i.e., because I'm looking at all these roses that are planted along their boundary. Activities and social management. Active community center or community building is important. Having a place where it's clearly identified as a place that people gather socially, whether it's the kids, the adults, and we have some scheduled and structured events for these areas, again, to give the residents and the users of the property specific things that they can do and that sense of belonging and ownership, because that helps to change the behavior and mindset of all of those that are here and using this area. They become, again, they feel more like owners versus more visitors. Usable picnic areas and recreational areas is important. You don't want to have areas that are not functional. And you want to make sure if it's a green space, use a green space, make it a green space, and make sure that it is a well maintained and well kept so that those that are in this community will use it. Maintain the environment. That is so important. Your trees, your grass, your shrubs, even when you go into your own neighborhoods, for those of you who are property owners, you like to see things well maintained and manicured because it gives you the ability to look at stuff and to observe if something is out of place. One of the things that when you look at residential buildings or commercial space or residential spaces, when things don't look cared for, and we refer to the broken window theory, and it reminds us of the visible signs of crime and antisocial behavior and civil disorder create that urban environment that encourages further crime and disorder, including serious crimes. Basically, in a nutshell, the broken window theory is broken windows encourages the breaking of more windows, and graffiti and other means of destruction can be viewed similarly. So if you notice that you go to some big cities and some what we would call neglected areas seem to have a lot of graffiti and If you visit often, you may see that amount of graffiti grow, especially if it's left unattended. So it's important that when in your particular housing communities, if you notice that graffiti has been placed on one of your structures, it is important to make efforts to immediately mitigate those pictures, because some of them can be labeled and construed as vulgar, which again impacts the community and those that live within. Landscape maintenance, very simply put, I typically, when I inspect, I refer to landscape, and I often use the last bullet here, 2 foot, 6 foot rule. We'll get to that, but it is important to maintain your landscape. Sometimes when you don't, you conceal windows, you create points of break-in or points that one could ambush another, which leaves that opportunity for someone to commit a criminal act, from anything from some of your theft to other violent crimes. So it is important to maintain that landscape, have your community look like it's cared for. And I think that is where a lot of agencies really look to put their improvements, is making sure that people understand that the people that live here care about the environment that they live in. And landscape is probably your first opportunity to let people know that you care about the property. The 2 foot, 6 foot rule, basically in a nutshell, vegetation from the ground, i.e., shrubs, bushes, any vegetation, your different beach grasses and things of that nature, all of those should not be allowed to grow above 2 feet. And for that reason, we ask that, you tend to your landscape and try to keep things in that realm. And there are some forms of vegetation that will hit 3 feet, because below 3 feet, they won't survive. But at any rate, when we look at the 2 foot rule, we look at it from the standpoint of that no one human can hide behind a 2 foot piece of shrubbery and be invisible to someone who's passing by, whether that is on a sidewalk or in an automobile. 6 foot rule is that all tree canopies should be 6 foot above, trimmed 6 foot above the ground. There are some entities that choose to go higher than that, but a minimum distance or minimum rule is 6 foot. And that gives the person that is walking a particular path good visibility if a tree is incorporated into the landscape along the path in which they're traveling. So you'll have the opportunity to identify a threat or a hazard down the line without having to navigate around branches and foliage that tends to block your view. So in 2025, 2026, the technology piece is picking up. We're going to talk a little bit about technology implementation. So technology implementation for most residential communities, as well as those that have commercial spaces, access control, video surveillance, alarm systems, and technology administration are an important part of their day-to-day operations. It is important for us to pay attention to these things as we are putting in protocols and steps to be more security aware of what's going on within our communities. So access controls. Implementation of fundamental concepts in security systems or security process that aids in the minimizing of security risk, controlling who can gain access to your property, whether it is in a gated community or keeping doors secure on a building and giving only those that need that access the ability to come in. So maintaining those controls to locations, items, and or information defends against unauthorized users access. I want to make sure we keep those people that may be bad actors out or that are not authorized to be in these areas, to keep them away. Some access controls, I have do's and don'ts here. So some of the do's are plan with detail, scrutinize access, don't just give it to anyone. They need to have a reason to be there. They need to be identified as a normal user. Develop use guidelines, have rules, have those guidelines in place for people that will be given the ability to have access. Break down a response. You want to make sure that if for some reason the equipment starts to fail or fails for some reason, that you have a plan, a protocol in place in order to respond. Just leaving a door unsecure after the access control system is failing and either it can't let people in or worse, won't let people out, you definitely want to have contractors in place to deal with that. And service your doors and access controls regularly, whether it's through the programs that operate these things or the physical places where these devices work. We want to make sure that they maintain a serviceable condition. Don't ever skip servicing. Don't delay in your software updates, as in these times, most everything has updates to remove bugs and other issues, and also to improve how these systems work. Share protected info. Don't ever share it. If it's supposed to be for a select group of folks, those are like keypad codes and combinations to enter particular areas. Protect those things. And again, don't delay repairs. If it's supposed to be a secure property with a secure access control, then we need to make sure that it is repaired and doing its job. Video surveillance systems. We want to make sure that when we're looking at video surveillance systems, this is a network of devices, and they may be 4 cameras or it could be 400 cameras in your network. And they're designed to capture images in motion, and it can be when they're being monitored, that's an active observation, and or record video footage. When it records and it's something you can come back and look at later, that's considered passive observation. That's where you can have something that happened and you say, hey, I want to look at the video, and you go back and look at it later. And that is how a lot of organizations typically run their security operations, is through surveillance, those kinds of surveillance activities where it's passive. Video surveillance systems, again, before you install them, and every now and again, I'll have someone ask a question about a particular system, but I would always tell people when giving a consult to them is to make sure that you research the specs prior to putting it out for bid or doing an installation. You want to make sure that you're getting the right equipment for the job that you're looking for. Plan for use and repairs. You need to set aside your budget and establish your budget for to keep this particular system or these systems up and running. You need to have policies and protocols in place that provide for you as a owner or a manager of a surveillance system who can gain access to it. Can I just call up and say, hey, I'm in unit 242 and I think somebody flattened my tires as a resident? Do I have the ability to just call you and request video footage? So you need to establish strong protocols to make sure that your policies are strong and video doesn't end up in the wrong hands. Consult with your legal counsel on these matters before instituting any type of policy or procedure as it relates to video surveillance. Maintain archived footage. Most places try to stick to that standard of 30 days, but in some environments, 30 days may be too short, because by time there becomes a case investigator in the case of a particular type of crime, there may be a time lapse of more than 30 days, probably closer to the 45 to 60 days. So at that point in time, if you are only maintaining 30 days of video footage, then the footage that is needed will have been overwritten or deleted. So it's a good idea to establish what your protocols will look like, and then how you will store and segregate video when it is brought to your attention that there may be value in some video that was captured. Don't share access freely. Don't give everyone the ability to look at the video. There are certain police departments across the country, they establish a link so that they can help you help them to keep crime down, and you become a part of their crime network where they can solve crimes both on your property and utilize your footage to help solve crimes across the city. Don't overlook disrepair. If you find that a camera is not working, when people know that your cameras are there, you want to make sure that they are all in good repair. Don't overlook disrepair. And do not abandon your written policies, because those can become a matter of a legal problem if you were supposed to do A, but you did M. So it's important that if you have a written policy in place on how your video system, surveillance system will work and will be used and who has access, stick to those things. Alarm systems. When we look at alarm systems, we are thinking that from a standpoint that there are all kinds of alarms out there. The system is usually designed to detect and alert asset management, building occupants, emergency responders about a specific event and or condition that may require their attention. So such as fire or intrusion, trespassing, burglary, or any other detected condition or hazard. And there could be a number of them. Even there are alarm systems that do temperature detection. So if a temperature falls out of tolerance or out of the range for a particular area within your building, an alarm is triggered and activated, and someone within that process will be notified. So when it comes to alarm systems, there are some do's and there are some don'ts. So it is important to understand your system's capability, ensure that it's applicable to what you're doing, what you need it for, and ensure there's connectivity. How is the system going to relay information once it's been triggered, whether it's a hard line through the internet, those need to be spelled out. Be responsive to authorities when they contact you about your alarm system, because the last thing you want to do is recreate the air that are not, you don't care about what's going on, and they will, in some cases, not be as quick to contact you and pay attention because you don't share that same passion about your alarm going off. So it's important to make sure that you are very responsive when they contact you. Repair deficiencies when noted. Those don'ts are don't ignore activations. And I said that on the side by side there. Share alarm codes, don't do that. That is just not feasible, because if there are multiple people sharing the same code and something goes wrong or something happens, now I've got 3 or 4 people tied to this one alarm code, and I can't tell you who stole them $1 million. So it's important that you don't share those things. And don't share system design information. That's important because most system designs are meant to be proprietary and specific to the location. So if there's certain things that you did to help your system be more efficient and effective for you, you don't want to share those things because that may lead to compromise. Technology administration, simply actively managing security systems, technologies, and policies to protect an organization's security related systems and data. Someone is going to have to be an administrator, or a group of people, maybe the administrator. Sometimes it falls within management or IT. It just depends upon how things are established for the particular organization. This should include activities like managing security systems, the implementation of security policies, monitoring and any related systems or user activity, i.e. access codes, that kind of thing. Training employees on applicable security protocols, again, train them not to share information, not to share their particular access controls, and what to look for and what to do, as well as all user responsibilities. We want to make sure that there's someone that can give focus on managing the technology that an organization deploys for security purposes. So now we've come to assessing the situation. What are we going to look at? Absolutely everything. We want to look at everything that can be impactful as we assess where we are with our security related features for a property or a community. So assessing the situation, when you're getting into assessing security, you'll need to examine, again, your location, lighting, the barriers that are there to help protect the community or the location. You want to know buildings, building type, heights, a lot of the demographic information for the buildings, and what valuables exist. Do you have a department store located as a part of this particular community, or do you have other valuables? Is there a safe in the office? Again, you need to determine what valuables exist as you're assessing a location. You also want to look at What kind of crime is going on in the area, or that maybe the location been a part of. You want to examine the type of activities to be conducted. Are we collecting cash or for rent? Are we simply an administrative location where we just help people get the resources they need? We need to look at the design of the location. We need to also look in detail at the current security situation. What does it look like? Are there guards? Are there no guards? Are there locks? No locks? Are there alarm systems? No alarm systems? And we need to look at all other areas that may be impacted by a security problem. So, how do we accomplish this assessment? Simply put, in the beginning, you've got to do a whole lot of planning. You really have to methodically look at what you're trying to figure out, and you've got to come up with a plan in dealing with it. You carefully and safely, day and night, look at places and parts, and you probably want to go out with as a team or as a group to make assessments when you're working at night, especially, and even in the daytime in certain environments, you may want to be with others so that you can focus not so much on your personal safety, but on what it is that you'll need to assess and look at it and make some recommendations or changes for. You want to look at historical data, and you can find that through calls for service or your police department. There are other apps and outlets that do data mine for law enforcement and police criminal crime data. So there are other options where you can purchase the information. You must be detailed in looking at things. You must be detail oriented because you're looking at what is it that we need to be doing? And the only way to figure that one out is you have to be detailed about it. We need to make sure that we have the right amount of time to do these assessments. We just can't run in and rush them to get done. We have to take time to make sure that we don't leave anything out. So when it comes to technology assessments, you want to make sure your surveillance cameras have been looked at, alarm systems, access control systems, your fire protection systems. You want to examine and look at utility control points. You want to look at IT and communication systems to make sure that they can both receive and deploy communications appropriately. Other assessments to look at would be security procedures. Are they written? And has everybody been trained on them that needs to be trained on them? Access roadways and driveways. How are they patrolled, maintained? How do I keep the wrong people from using them? Neighborhood layout. Again, if depending upon what you're assessing and where it's located, you want to look at the neighborhood layout. What streets or what wooded areas, where are they? Are there hazards that will impact my location? So all of those things have to be examined thoroughly. When assessing areas for potential security issues, you want to review the location. You want to review the incident history for that location. And you want to review the uses of the asset. What is it used for? Again, to make sure that the potential for a problem has been mitigated or completely eliminated. When assessing areas for potential security issues, you also want to review the uses of specific interior spaces because everyone won't need access. So if you've got data spaces or file rooms, those kinds of things. Hours of use, you want to examine that. When are we open? When is it open to the public? When can residents come in? Environmental influences. We want to know, is this particular location sheltered from the elements, or is it an outdoor area? Is it exposed to everyday weather? So you just want to make sure that again, you're looking at things and you're reviewing and asking questions. Community spaces. There are a lot of them: parks, picnic areas, playgrounds, fields of play, just open green spaces, basketball courts, parking lots, laundry rooms, walkways, other pathways and alleyways, recreational and activity centers, porches that are affixed to residential spaces, entryways for all buildings and structures, or games rooms, places where people can come be involved in recreational game playing. When it comes to commercial property, we also want to look at outdoor seating. I know that some commercial places and office spaces, they have little seating areas for people to sit out and enjoy lunch in the outdoors. Server rooms are spaces that you want to look at. Daycare and support areas, recreational courts, walkways, pathways that may lead between buildings, exits and entrances. You want to examine lighting again, because when you're talking about commercial spaces, sometimes you have security things in place. So you want to make sure lighting is a part of that check as you're looking at the location and doing your assessment. Storage spaces, those are important, whether they are within the building or outside spaces like tool sheds or garages, warehouse areas, parking lots, break areas, mechanical rooms, and restrooms are all a part of that assessment piece. What's important to program success? I would say that when you look at these, you want to evaluate the needs, security needs. What do you need? Not what you want, but what do you need? Avoid delays in responses to issues. Again, if an issue is reported or an experience has been had or police have been called because something happened and now you have something that you need to deal with, you need to be responsive and deal with it immediately. Seek experience where you are deficient in having certain experiences related to security. Avoid the no action approach, as that erodes and destroys the organization's credibility for both a community as well as the residents that may reside there. And again, you have to have collaboration, because sometimes that collaboration can provide you resources that you may not otherwise be able to obtain. Today, we covered the following. We connected security to risk management. We introduced some proactive operational behaviors. We made sure that we went to explaining some of that. We also summarized basic strategic thinking in real estate oversight. We described a few basic site security concepts. We also identified some basics around technology implementation, and we described some security assessment basics. So today we covered a lot, and if you have questions, you'll have the opportunity. You can reach out to your risk control professional for your particular organization, and they will be more than happy to assist. Thank you.